What's the number one area of Hollow Knight that has some room for improvement? If you had to ask me, I'd say it's the charms.
What?
No, alright. I know that sounds bad.
Hear me out on this one. I absolutely adore Hollow Knight's charm system. There's something so fun about sitting at a bench and reevaluating your loadout. I really enjoy trying to weigh the value of multiple cheaper charms versus just one that's heavier on the notches. And the notch limitations force you to make sacrifices in your build since you can't just equip every charm at once, without mods that is. Plus, they're just super fun to collect and look at. I like how they all have unique names, designs, and descriptions. It's interesting how they seem to capture some of the essence of where the charm was found or the person that gave it to you. The charm system is awesome conceptually, but where it falls a bit short in my opinion is overall balance. Let's take a look at the top 3 combat charms in this game. Net DPS buff, Net DPS buff, and Net DPS and Soul Generation buff rolled into one. I love using these because they're strong, and Quick Slash is especially fun because nail go burr, but why are some of the more interesting and creative charms that change your kit and gameplay up more so bad in comparison? I've got a video up ranking the Hollow Knight charms for combat uses already, so this video will serve as sort of a sequel to that one where we redeem some of the stinkers. And don't get me wrong, you can definitely beat Hollow Knight's toughest challenges with the absolute worst combat charms equipped, and even no charms at all. But I'd love it if there was just more variety in the viable endgame charms. We'll be discussing buffing some of the lower end combat charms today to bring them closer on par with the top combat charms. I don't want to nerf any of the top ones, I just want to see more things a little bit closer to the level of the best things. For the rules, ideally, I'd like to only change 1 to 2 fundamental things about the charm to make it more combat viable without erasing its current identity. It would be really easy to get carried away with a long list of ridiculous effects like invincibility, insanely bloated damage numbers, or even just making expensive charms ridiculously cheap in notch cost. We don't need to necessarily make the charms broken or S tier, just making them a little more on par with the A or B tiers will do for today. Enough explanations, here's the bottom 9 charms I think need a buff to make them more combat viable and what I would do to change them, hopefully without making them straight up busted. Hive Blood. This 4-notch charm will heal the last unit of health lost after being hit, as long as you don't get hit again for 10 seconds. This has a limit where if you've lost multiple masks and the most recent mask has been healed by Lifeblood, it no longer continues to try to heal the next mask after that. Getting hit again will allow the charm to attempt another free heal though. The main usefulness for this charm is platforming and exploration, especially in areas like the White Palace so you can infinitely heal after missing a platform or catching a buzzsaw to the dome. It really shines there and it's very high tier if we were just talking about exploration and platforming, but we're talking about combat today. I've seen some say they like this charm for the part of Colosseum of Fools where the floor goes away, but I personally think it's just better and safer to burst the enemies down with Nail Arts and Nail Master's Glory, so they have less chances to hit you and you get the floor back faster. It's also worth noting that this charm could allow for less soul spent on healing overall if you're getting a free mask in here and there, leaving you more soul for spells. Let's go over my gripes with this charm. The 4-notch cost is steep, allowing it to fit into less builds overall and giving it less options for synergies. Its best charm synergy is probably with Grub Song for unlimited platforming fails, but that slow infinite heal won't save you in the Pantheons. I guess you could pair it with Baldur Shell to give it a few seconds of invulnerability and guarantee you get your free heal in some cases. That's a 6-notch combo with not much payoff. Some also suggest pairing it with Joni's Blessing, but that's an even more expensive combo and doubles how long the masks take to regenerate. What's the point then if I have to wait like 20 seconds for a heal? The 10 seconds you have to wait for a free Hive Blood mask is a long time, and even longer with Joni's on. If you can dodge a boss for 10 or 20 seconds, then you can typically dodge long enough to find a heal opportunity without wasting your 4+ notches on Hive Blood. So how do we fix this one? It's a bit tricky in my opinion since reducing the cooldown for a free mask too much quickly makes this charm incredibly overpowered. But maybe I'm thinking about this all wrong. If you're spending 4 whole notches and you're skilled enough to dodge for the duration of the long cooldown, then maybe you should be rewarded with a free heal to save your soul for spells. Let's lean into that. Instead of reducing the cooldown here, let's remove the 1 mask heal limit and let it keep healing you as long as you're able to consistently dodge. This rewards clutch moments and skilled play, and lets you save your soul to go on the offensive with instead of spending it on heals. This would be absolutely amazing for spellcaster builds. If the healing is too much or too strong that way, we could always up the cooldown for a free mask up to 15 seconds rather than 10, but I think simply removing that 1 mask restriction would easily bump Hive Blood up a tier or 2 in combat. This would definitely be a bit too strong for exploration though, but I'm just imagining a scenario where you're down to 1 mask and absolutely lock in to slowly get back to full health. That would be hype as hell and definitely reward skilled play. Defender's Crest. This 1-notch charm creates a heroic aura of stank around the night that deals about 3 damage every second that an enemy is within range. The range is exceptionally small and it trails behind you as you move, so it's a bit tough to consistently have enemies within the aura to take damage. It does help with popping those 1 HP infection balloons before they can reach you, so you can ignore those in fights where they spawn in and just focus on the boss. This does mean you'll get slightly less soul throughout the fight though, since the balloons do generate soul upon nail hit. Defender's Crest has a ton of charm synergies, but they're arguably all bad except for the Spore Shroom synergy. Spore Shroom plus Defender's Crest is just a straight up damage buff to Spore Shroom, but the other combos like Glowing Womb for example, lose out on some initial burst damage in favor of adding Lingering Stink Clouds. Since bosses in this game tend to move around a lot, in most cases the Fart Cloud will do little to nothing and you were better off with just the initial higher damage value without Defender's Crest on. Fixing this one's pretty simple. Let's increase the size of the Knight's aura by 50 to 100%. To make it easier to catch enemies in it since the damage is so low anyways. We may as well make it more consistent in affecting enemies because as is, enemies never stay in the stink cloud for too long. Let's also just buff the synergy so that they don't nerf the burst damage but still add the lingering cloud effect. This would make Defender's Crest actually good to throw on at the end of a build rather than actually being harmful in some cases. At 1 notch, Defender's Crest is already as cheap as charms go, so we don't need to make it do anything too crazy. We would just be making it consistently helpful to throw on rather than sometimes harmful. Grimchild. This 3-notch charm spawns in your adopted son Grimathy to follow you around and occasionally shoot fireballs at nearby enemies. The fireballs are mediocre damage and have a chance to miss, but the little guy puts his whole heart into it. On top of this, he will continue shooting even if a boss is staggered, causing the stagger to end early and for you to lose a great opportunity for a heal. I have a great idea for how to buff this one. Let's change the automatic occasional fireballs and replace them with more controlled ones. Rather than firing every few seconds, let's change Grimchild to fire upon each successful nail hit, and that's the only change this charm needs to thrive. This would solve the problem of Grimchild ending staggers prematurely and eliminating heal windows, but also gives it a new synergy with Quick Slash to turn it into a little DPS machine. This might be too broken though, and we would need to do some testing to evaluate the damage numbers. Maybe too much damage too quickly next to Quick Slash and Fragile or Unbreakable Strength. The numbers could be tweaked on the fireball damage if needed, but I think this one change brings Grimchild into at least A tier by eliminating its biggest weakness, putting more control of its actions into the player's hands directly, and giving it a much needed charm synergy. Oh, and you won't get eviscerated by walking into Fog Canyon with this thing on anymore. Heavy Blow. Hang on, let me check my notes. It just says, how do you even save this one skull emoji? This 2-notch charm has 2 effects. The first is that it increases horizontal knockback that regular enemies receive from your nail hits by 75%. The second is that when used against bosses with the stagger, they will stagger 1 hit sooner than normal. Most bosses just don't take knockback at all, so the first effect is useless most of the time. And for the stagger effect, not every boss has a stagger, so what's the point of using it in the Pantheons? The only niche case I've heard people use this for is in Coliseum of Fools to more easily knock enemies into spikes, which is pretty cool. But everywhere else, pushing regular enemies farther away from you is typically bad, as you're spending more time chasing them down than before, which gives them more opportunities to do things like hurl projectiles at you. Fixing Heavy Blow is tough since both effects are extremely niche. No matter how much you buff the knockback amount, you just have to spend even more time chasing down regular enemies, and that doesn't really help at all. Plus, a buffed knockback does nothing against bosses that just don't take any. The stagger effect is also okay as it is, but even if we buff that one, not every boss has a stagger. There's 2 routes we could take here. The first option is we could drop it down to a 1-notch charm, leave it how it is with 1 bad effect and 1 okay one, and have it be a niche use case charm with unique but situational effects in D or low C tier. The second option is to completely rework this charm and give it a brand new effect from what Team Cherry intended. I've seen and discussed with my community on Discord multiple suggestions like adding splash damage, adding burst damage when hitting enemies into walls, applying a damage over time effect, but we're trying to lean into the charm's strengths here rather than rewriting them entirely and making another net DPS buff type of charm. Unfortunately, Heavy Blow is the hardest to meaningfully buff out of all the charms here today. After a lot of consideration, I think the best thing we can do is make Heavy Blow a 1-notch niche pick rather than a 2-notch one it currently is. This way, it's at least easier to consider for your build, and you don't have to consider infinite DPS buff possibilities when Team Cherry clearly wanted this to be a unique utility charm. Deep Focus. This 4-notch charm allows you to heal 2 masks at once, at the cost of your heal being 65% longer. This is another one that's great for platforming and exploration, since it gives you more bang for your buck on soul and platforming fails long term. But for the life of me, I cannot understand why this 4-notch charm has such a drastic negative effect associated with it. Imagine if you had other charms that work this way. Say you spent 3 notches on Unbreakable Strength to get the 50% nail damage buff, but it also decreased your overall nail swing speed by 65% as a penalty. Not as good, right? You're already spending your notches, and a lot of them too, so why are you also suffering a debuff that makes it harder to find viable healing opportunities? I 100% believe this charm should stay how it is, but with little or even no healing speed reduction. You should not have to pay twice for this charm, in notch cost and debuff cost, when other charms only make you pay once. This way, you're actually getting a net buff for equipping Deep Focus and can save your soul for spellcasting. If normal heal speed is too overpowered to get on double masks here, then maybe only increase the heal length by 25 to 33% instead of the drastic 65%. Most heal windows would still be viable this way, especially if you do the quick focus charm combo. This one change easily would make Deep Focus way more combat viable and give healing builds another great option to work with. Dream Shield. This 3-notch charm spawns in a shield that slowly rotates around the player and blocks some projectiles. If the shield makes contact with an enemy, it will deal 1 times nail damage, generate 0 soul, and go on a short cooldown where it can't block anything. This damage is unaffected by the strength charm. As is, Dream Shield feels like a situational charm that should be slapped on at the end of a build for 1 or 2 notches. But it's currently 3 notches, and it's just not good enough for that cost. As for weaknesses, some would say the 1 times nail damage and the fact that it can't be boosted by strength is a negative. I would personally argue that this doesn't matter too much, as Dream Shield is more of a defensive utility charm than an offensive one, which is unique and something we should lean into rather than just trying to make it another DPS source. It is still worth mentioning here though. You also don't have much control over the shield as it just floats around you at a fixed speed, so it might not be where you need it when you need it. You can help this a bit by equipping the Dream Wielder charm and making the shield slightly bigger, but even then the shield is inconsistent as it temporarily stops blocking things whenever it collides with an enemy and also just doesn't block all projectiles. We need to make this charm more consistent and make it worth its 3-notch cost. Let's leave the damage and downtime how it is, but have it generate soul upon shield hit. I think it's fair that the soul generation would not stack with things like Soul Catcher or Soul Eater, because that could be overkill. I also have a fun idea of having the shield be controllable by having it always float behind you, so you can intentionally look left to block a projectile from the right, or look down to block a projectile from above, for example. This would make using the Dream Shield way more consistent and reward skilled users for good shield placement and timing. I can also imagine this would be especially strong, maybe even too strong, against some infection rain attacks like Brooding Molex or Winged Nosks. But for 3 notches, I think it should be a pretty significant effect, and these 2 changes could really go a long way. King Soul. This 5-notch charm automatically generates 4 soul every 2 seconds. This is an interesting one because I almost think Team Cherry intentionally made this charm bad so that you don't get too attached to it and miss it once you've replaced it with Void Heart. King Soul is unique in that it's the only charm that grants you soul on its own without needing to damage an enemy in some way, which I've heard some argue gives it a niche for playing at a distance in Radiant fights. That's totally fair, but for being the only charm that costs 5 notches, this thing should accrue soul at 1.5 times or 2 times the rate it does currently. It's just too slow as it is. I'm sorry if this is a bit of a boring resolution for this one, but it's a relatively straightforward effect, and genuinely all it needs is a faster rate of accrual to feel worth the 5 notches. It does not feel worth it at all currently. I do worry though that if King Soul gets too strong, it would feel bad to give up in exchange for Void Heart, but that's not really our concern for today, and better numbers would indeed make this a better charm. Glowing Womb. This 2-notch charm drains 8 soul to spawn 1 hatchling every 4 seconds, which seek out enemies and explode on contact for 9 damage. You can have a maximum of 4 hatchlings stacked at a time, assuming you have downtime between encounters and enough soul to spawn them all in. The main weakness of this charm is, unless you're rocking a build with a ton of soul gain, you'll rarely have enough soul left for healing or casting spells due to the constant drain of your newborn children. In most cases, it's just better to keep that soul and use chunky Shaman Stone spells or to have some soul left over to heal yourself up. Speaking of healing yourself up, the heat-seeking little Hellraisers do not care if that boss is staggered and you'd like a second to heal. They have a mission, Predator Missile is inbound, and your heal window no longer exists. At only 2 notches for this charm, I think we should leave the inability to heal during a stagger weakness in, because I think it's funny that the hatchlings are a bit dumb and only live to immediately die. One big thing that needs to change though is the synergy with Defender's Crest. As is, equipping Defender's Crest is effectively a net nerf to this charm's DPS output. The synergy drops the burst damage down from 9 to 4 in exchange for a stink cloud that spawns upon contact and can deal the same 5 damage you lost back over the course of about a second. This would be assuming the enemy sits still long enough to take the entirety of damage from the cloud, which they don't usually do. Essentially, for one more notch, you're losing burst damage in exchange for damage over time that peaks at the same net damage and averages even less. Horrible. We can fix this and make it an actual synergy by either not lowering the burst damage at all, or only lowering it by 1 or 2 points at most if absolutely necessary. We should never be getting a net damage nerf for what's supposed to be a synergy, and this way Glowing Womb's value goes up significantly. If hatchlings are going to be draining your soul and interrupting your heals, we can at least make the damage worthwhile. On top of this buff to Defender's Crest synergy, I also think we should nerf the soul drain amount from 8 per hatchling to 7 per hatchling. This is a small change that keeps the original intended design and built-in drawback in place, while slightly tuning down the soul drain long term. You're already spending 2 notches for extra chip damage, you shouldn't spend your entire soul bar too. Thorns of Agony. If you've seen any of my other charm ranking content, you'll probably know by now that I personally believe this is the worst charm in the game. This 1-notch charm has the effect that once hit, the knight will freeze in place for a moment and shoot out thorn tendrils that deal 1 nail hit worth of damage. So why is this one so bad? It's not the notch cost, because that's the only thing it has going in its favor. 1 notch cost is as good as it gets unless you're a special case like Voidheart. First defense, its effect only activates when you take damage. Grubsong also has this downside, but Grubsong has the flexibility of weighing out its own weakness by either giving you almost enough soul to heal the damage you took, or giving you more soul towards a spell for bursting down a boss. What does Thorns of Agony give you for the 1 mask you lost? 1 times nail damage if the enemy is still close enough to be hit. This amount is not boosted by the strength charm and does not generate soul, so by giving up one of your precious notches, upon being hit, you'll deal less damage and gain less soul than if you just smacked the boss once during your invincibility frames with strength on. On top of this charm eats some of your invincibility frames sometimes, causing you to get hit twice since you have slightly less time to reposition yourself out of a sticky situation. At just 1 notch, you've still got arguably the worst charm in the game. Thorns actively nerfs your damage by not being boostable by strength, nerfs your soul gain by not gaining any soul upon hit, and nerfs your survivability by giving you slightly less control of your character in bad situations. This charm needs a lot of work. As it is, even at 0 notches, I probably wouldn't use it. I thought about letting its hits generate soul, but then it's just treading too far into Grubsong territory in my opinion. I think the best route to take with Thorns of Agony is to remove the movement restriction. That brief pause where the thorns come out. This way, the thorns act as passive chip damage whenever you happen to get hit without preventing you from reacting to get out of danger and still allowing you to swing your nail for a free hit and soul during your iframes. I feel that as a 1-notch charm, many more people would use thorns in this updated state with the last notch of their build, allowing it to really keep annoying hordes of enemies at bay and add extra chip damage during boss fights. And that was our last charm for today. If you're paying close enough attention, you'll notice that this was just the bottom 9 for my tier list, minus the 2 Lifeblood charms that were down that low. It's definitely intentional. I think I'd like to see an entire rework of Lifeblood as a whole mechanic, and maybe that'll be its own video someday. But until next time, see ya.